Danielle, have you ever felt so tired, not just in your body, but in your soul, that all you wanted was silence and a door that finally stayed shut? That's where Eliza Hart was, right before she knocked on the wrong one. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. Sometimes the wrong door is exactly the one that opens your life. A man, a room, a night that wasn't supposed to matter, but did. Because for the first time, she didn't have to earn softness. She just had to receive it. In under 5 minutes, you'll witness a full circle moment of quiet redemption, a romance that doesn't rescue but recognizes, a woman who reclaims her name, her work, and her worth, especially when no one expected her to. In under 5 minutes, you'll witness a full circle moment of quiet redemption, a romance that doesn't rescue but recognizes, a woman who reclaims her name, her work, and her worth, especially when no one expected her to. This is one of those unforgettable Black woman stories where an ordinary mistake opens the door to something extraordinary. Have you ever been so tired, not just in your bones, but in your soul, that all you wanted was silence? That's where Elena Morris was. She wasn't looking for a miracle. She wasn't looking for anything really. Just 48 hours away from the smell of bleach and hospital-grade sorrow. Just a window seat maybe, and a lukewarm coffee with too much creamer. But fate had a different itinerary. Elena blinked at the sleek private jet gleaming on the tarmac. She clutched her wrinkled boarding pass, confusion tugging at her brows. This can't be right, she mumbled, glancing at the gate number again. It was. Gate 7C, just like her ticket said. A uniformed flight attendant stepped forward. Miss Morris. Elena hesitated. Yeah, right this way. And just like that, she followed the woman up the steps and into the cabin, expecting maybe a fancy business class setup. What she got instead was luxury, the kind of quiet, buttery elegance that whispered money in a language she didn't speak. Cream leather seats, real glassware, a fruit tray that looked curated by angels. She stood frozen in the aisle, backpack slung awkwardly over one shoulder, wondering if this was some kind of prank. Then a man looked up from a leather armchair near the back of the cabin. He was tall, even sitting down. Crisp navy shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, reading glasses perched low on a chiseled nose. The kind of man you only saw in Forbes articles or in movies starring Denzel. He raised an eyebrow. "You're early," he said. Elena blinked. "Excuse me." He set his tablet down. "No offense, but they usually don't show up until champagne's already been poured." Elena gave a tight laugh. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm supposed to be on a flight to Atlantic City." He stood up slowly, studying her. His voice, when he spoke again, was amused and curious, not angry. "This plane is going to Paris." Elena's stomach dropped. "Paris," she echoed, already fumbling for her phone. She pulled up her confirmation email and stared at it, horrified. Wrong flight, wrong airport code, wrong everything. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I was supposed to meet my friend at Terminal B. I wasn't even supposed to be here." The man crossed his arms. "You didn't realize you were boarding a private jet. I thought it was some kind of fancy charter." "I've never flown anything but Spirit," she added, flustered. "And that gate attendant just waved me through. I didn't even—" She stopped, mortified. The man paused, then smiled just slightly. "Well, that explains the backpack." 10 minutes later, she was sitting on the same cream leather seat, clutching a glass of water, like it was her moral compass. Damien Carter, that was his name, had asked the flight crew to wait while he sorted this out. He sat across from her, now phone in hand, murmuring something in French to a contact. She tried not to stare, but the man was something. Not just good-looking, but put together, in a way that made her painfully aware of her ponytail, her discount sneakers, and the fact that she hadn't eaten since a granola bar 10 hours ago. He hung up. "Here's the deal," he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. "We can't reroute, and turning back isn't possible from this airport." Elena's heart thudded, but he continued. "We land in Paris in 7 hours. I'll make sure you're booked on the first commercial flight back to the States." She exhaled, relieved. He held up a finger. "But while you're on this plane, just relax. No need to explain anything. Accidents happen. Elena stared at him. You're not mad. He gave her a sideways look. Why would I be mad at someone who looks like they haven't slept in a week? She let out a surprised laugh. Then 2 weeks, actually. Damien smiled. Then sit back, Elena Morris. Paris is beautiful this time of year. 7 hours later, Paris welcomed them with a sunset that looked like melted honey poured over stone buildings. The airport customs officer barely glanced at her passport. Damien had already arranged VIP clearance. The car that picked them up was black quiet and smelled like cedar. They didn't talk much on the drive. Elena was too stunned, too unsure how to exist in a world where people held doors open for her, treated her like she belonged. When they pulled up to the hotel, she gasped. It wasn't a hotel. It was a palace disguised as one. Gold trim, velvet awnings, a concierge that addressed Damien by name. Elena followed him inside like someone half awake. A different kind of tired now, emotional bone deep. Damien turned before the elevator doors closed. I had them prepare a separate suite for you. She nodded. Thank you. He paused, then added, You don't have to join me for dinner, but if you feel like talking, I'll be on the rooftop at 8. The doors slid shut. Elena stared at her reflection in the mirror-paneled walls. A tired woman, out of place, out of her league. But maybe, just maybe, not out of chances. Elena stood in the doorway of her suite, not moving. She wasn't sure if it was the size of the room bigger than the apartment she shared with her younger brother, or the fact that someone had already placed lavender tea on the nightstand like they knew exactly what kind of tired she carried. She stepped in slowly, taking in the pale blue walls, the fresh flowers, the balcony that opened to the Paris skyline, like a dream she didn't dare have. The bed was made with tight hospital corners, the sheets like clouds. There was even a pair of slippers by the bathroom, as if someone had guessed her feet had been screaming since yesterday. She sat on the edge of the bed. Then she cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears that slipped down without warning, like the body finally letting go after being on guard for too long. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was 2 years of holding everything together after her parents' accident, after quitting nursing school for a while, after juggling bills, after giving up every birthday, every vacation, every tiny piece of something that felt like freedom. And now here she was, in a luxury suite in Paris, because of a mistake. At 8 to 12 p.m., she stood in front of the rooftop door, heart hammering in her chest. She had changed into the simple black dress the hotel concierge had arranged, which apparently meant something elegant but comfortable. It hugged her lightly, nothing flashy, but made her feel different, less invisible. She wasn't sure why she had come. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way Damien had looked at her, not like she was a burden or a joke, but like she was a person he actually wanted to talk to. Or maybe she just needed to know what kind of man made room for strangers in his sky. The rooftop was bathed in golden light. Soft jazz drifted from speakers, hidden somewhere in the garden walls. The Eiffel Tower glimmered in the distance like a secret held up to the stars. Damien stood near the edge, 2 glasses in hand. Didn't think you'd come, he said, offering her one. Elena took it. Didn't think I would either. They clinked glasses, hers with sparkling water, his with something amber, and leaned against the rail. For a while neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind that made you feel like the world had stopped spinning just for a bit. You live in Paris, she finally asked. Split my time. Boston, Paris, sometimes Berlin if I'm chasing venture money. She smirked. Sounds exhausting. It is, he said, smiling. But I like building things. Elena nodded. What kind of things? Damien hesitated. Tech, platforms, automation for health systems. Not the kind of dinner talk that impresses anyone unless you're into electronic medical records. She raised an eyebrow. You build hospital software? He looked at her. Yeah. Why? She sipped her water. I'm an ICU nurse. That got his attention. Really? Really? He smiled. Then I guess I should say thank you for what you do. Elena shrugged. I don't do anything special. Just try to keep people alive. His gaze softened. That's more than most. A moment passed. Then another. Then quietly he said, I lost someone 3 years ago. My best friend. Heart failure. ICU didn't catch it in time. I'm sorry, she said genuinely. He was the guy who started the company with me, the visionary. I was just the guy who knew how to write code and charm investors. After he died, I kept running like it made sense, but nothing really does. Elena looked out at the tower. I know that feeling, she said. When my parents died, I didn't stop. I just redirected. Straight into bills, straight into responsibilities. Like grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Damien didn't reply, but the silence between them deepened, stretched, softened. You think this was a glitch in the universe? She asked, almost smiling. Me ending up on your plane. He looked at her serious. No, I think it was the first thing in a while that made sense. She froze, not because of what he said, but how he said it. Like it wasn't a line, like it surprised even him. He looked away, then almost embarrassed. You don't have to say things to make me feel better, she said gently. I don't, he replied. I usually don't say much at all. They both laughed. The kind of laugh that says, okay, this is strange, but it's also real. Later, back in her suite, Elena sat on the balcony with her bare feet up, watching the city shimmer like a warm secret. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. Not because a rich man was kind to her, not because of Paris, but because something in her had shifted. And maybe, just maybe, that shift was the beginning of something she could call her own. The next morning, Elena woke up before the sun. She didn't mean to, it was a habit. Years of pre-dawn shifts of commuting before the world got noisy had trained her body to rise early, even in luxury sheets softer than anything she owned. For a while, she just lay there, eyes open, breathing in the quiet. Paris felt far away from her real life, like she'd pressed pause on her own story and stumbled into someone else's. Someone who didn't need to check her bank balance before buying coffee. Someone who didn't worry if her brother had enough money to cover his textbooks. Someone who didn't measure rest in minutes. But the truth was, this wasn't her life. Not really. She made her way downstairs quietly, unsure what the protocol was in a place like this. But before she reached the lobby, she spotted Damien, already at a small cafe table, on the terrace, sleeves rolled again, coffee in hand, reading something on his phone. He looked up. Morning. Morning, she said, folding her arms against the breeze. You sleep okay? She nodded. Better than I expected. The bed might have healed trauma I didn't know I had. He grinned. French linen will do that. They sat for a while, sipping coffee that actually tasted like something. Damien glanced at her over the rim of his cup. What's the plan today? She blinked. For me, he nodded. I was planning to call the airline, get a commercial flight home. He tilted his head. Today? Well, yeah. I don't belong here. There it was. The word she hadn't meant to say out loud. He didn't flinch. Just looked at her a moment, then said, You want to stay one more day? She blinked. Why? I have no agenda. But it's a beautiful day, and I think there's more to see. Elena hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because saying yes meant admitting that she did. That maybe, just maybe, she deserved one day that wasn't about survival. Okay, she said quietly. One more day. He smiled, then truly smiled, and it was different than the polite version she'd seen before. Not charming, not polished, just human. Like a door opened just a little, revealing something unguarded. That afternoon they took a walk by the river. No chauffeur, no plans. Just two people in sneakers and sunglasses blending into the tourists. They talked about books, about music, about what Paris meant to each of them. She told him about her mother's obsession with French films, about how her father used to hum old jazz records while doing the dishes. He listened. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak. The kind where someone sees you without even needing to fix you. That night, back in her suite, Elena stared out at the Paris skyline again. Only this time, it didn't feel like it belonged to someone else. Just for a moment, it felt like hers too. Like this city, this accident, this story was the beginning of something she hadn't dared to imagine. And as she curled up beneath linen sheets, Heart lighter than it had been in years, she realized something that made her smile in the dark. She wasn't lost. She had just taken a different route. Black woman stories aren't always about survival. Sometimes they're about being seen. Elena didn't expect to feel comfortable the next day. She expected awkwardness, maybe a polite breakfast, and a quick arrangement to fly home. But instead what she got was a dress. Not just any dress, it was folded gently on the armchair in her suite. Soft olive green with a note that read, "Figured this might suit the weather. No pressure. D." Elena stared at it like it might evaporate if she touched it. The dress wasn't expensive looking. It didn't scream rich man's idea of beauty. It looked thoughtful, like someone had actually considered who she was. She ran her fingers along the fabric, then smiled small cautious, because there's a difference between being given something to impress you and being given something to include you. Downstairs, Damien stood by the fountain in the lobby, checking his watch but not looking impatient. He wore a charcoal blazer over a casual white tee, and his expression shifted when he saw her. Not to hungry, not to flirtatious, just a kind of quiet approval that didn't ask her to change anything. "You look comfortable," he said. "I am," she replied. And strangely, she was. They had breakfast at a small garden cafe tucked inside a stone courtyard. It was the kind of place you wouldn't find on travel blogs. No long lines, no camera flashes, just croissants that melted on your tongue and a lemon jam that made her close her eyes. She didn't mean to let her guard down, but it slipped, slowly, without asking for permission. They talked about ridiculous hospital moments like the time she had to chase a patient down the hall in socks. He laughed, really laughed, and it made something in her unclench. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "Neither are you," he replied. Later, they walked through a quiet neighborhood in the 7th arrondissement. Cobblestone streets, tiny balconies with potted geraniums, a violinist playing something wistful near a bookstore. It was all too much. Too pretty, too perfect, too far from the Elena who once cried in the break room because she couldn't afford rent and meds in the same week. He caught her looking away. "What is it?" Damien asked. She shook her head. "Nothing." "Elena." She exhaled slowly. "It's just, all of this feels like it belongs to someone else. Not me." He didn't say anything for a second. "Then I know the feeling." She turned to him, surprised. He tucked his hands in his pockets. "My mother was a waitress in Vermont. Single mom. Scrubbed diner counters until her hands bled. The first time I stayed at a hotel like this, I ordered 2 dinners just because I could." Elena stared. "You?" He nodded. "Me." They stopped by a quiet bench near a fountain. Damien sat beside her, not close, but not distant either. "You're not a tourist to this city," he said, "but maybe you are to this life." Elena tilted her head. "And that's supposed to make me feel—" "What?" He smiled softly. "Welcome, if you'll let it." She looked away, unsure what to say, but in her chest something flickered. Not desire, not fantasy, just the beginning of permission to stop apologizing for existing in someone else's beautiful day. Later, back at the hotel, they lingered in the lobby, neither ready to say goodbye, but neither sure how to stay. Damien cleared his throat. "I have a meeting tonight. Short, boring, but after—" He hesitated. "Would you have dinner with me rooftop again? Or somewhere else? Wherever you'd be most comfortable." Elena blinked. There was no pressure in his voice, no undertone, just a man asking. "I thought I was leaving tomorrow." "You are," he said. "Unless you want one more day?" Another choice, another invitation, not to a life of wealth, but to a space where she didn't have to shrink. She looked up at him, tired, curious, brave in a way only tired women can be. And then she nodded. One more day. The rooftop was different this time. Last night it had been golden and soft like something out of a movie. Tonight it was quieter. The sky a deeper navy, the wind cooler, more honest. There were fewer lights, fewer words. Elena stood by the railing, arms folded lightly over her borrowed dress. Damien was still inside, probably finishing whatever mysterious meeting billionaires have at 7 p.m. in Paris. She liked the quiet, though. It reminded her of the ICU during shift change. Those strange 10 minutes when everyone held their breath between chaos and calm. Except here, she wasn't holding anything for anyone but herself. When Damien appeared, he was minus the blazer this time. Shirt sleeves rolled again. There was something familiar in the way he looked, like a man trying to look normal in a life that rarely let him be. "I brought wine," he said, holding up a bottle. She smirked. "You always announce your offerings." "Only when I'm trying not to screw things up." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Are you screwing it up?" he asked. She shrugged, teasing. "Trying." He handed her the glass with a crooked smile. "Tell me how I'm doing at the end." They sat at the same table as the night before, but it didn't feel like déjà vu. It felt like continuation. Damien poured for her, then himself. The silence between them was different now. Less like strangers, more like people unwrapping a secret at the same pace. He leaned back. "So, ICU nurse, still want to do that forever?" Elena took a sip. "Some days. Other days I want to open a bookstore cafe and never hear a heart monitor beep again." He smiled. "What's stopping you?" "Student loans, rent, my brother's tuition, life." He nodded as if he'd already guessed. "How old is he?" 18. Just started college. Wants to be a physical therapist." "That's a good path." "It is," she said, then paused. "He doesn't know I used the rent money to buy his textbooks last month." Damien's eyes met hers, not with pity, with respect. "You're a good sister," he said. Elena looked away. "I'm tired." He nodded again, slower this time. "I know that kind of tired." They sat in silence for a long time. The wine sat half finished. The tower in the distance blinked like a sleepy eye. Then Damien said, "I was supposed to be a teacher." Elena turned to him, startled. "I was going to teach high school computer science. Had a scholarship to Boston University. My friend Mark. We met in freshman year. He was brilliant, disorganized, wild. But he saw patterns in systems like no one else." He paused, sipping slowly. "We dropped out sophomore year, built a prototype, found a small investor. Suddenly we're flying to San Francisco, pitching to people twice our age. Then we got lucky. Really lucky." Elena listened quietly. "By 28, we were worth hundreds of millions. Forbes called us the new kings of health tech." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then Mark collapsed. Just collapsed. No warning. Massive heart failure. She winced. "I'm sorry." He coded on the way to the hospital. They revived him twice. But by the time he reached the ICU, Damien didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Elena understood silence like that. It was the kind of silence only death leaves behind. "He hated hospitals," Damien said finally. "Irony, right? We built a system to help ERs run faster. But when it mattered most, the machines we created couldn't save him." Elena's voice was soft. "You know that wasn't your fault?" He met her eyes. "Don't we all carry blame we don't deserve?" She couldn't argue with that. Because hadn't she blamed herself for not being home the night her parents crashed on that icy road? Hadn't she wondered if one more phone call could have changed something? Guilt wasn't logical. It was just loyal. A breeze passed between them, cool and full of all the things they hadn't said yet. Then Damien looked at her steady. "You're not a woman people forget, Elena." She blinked. "What?" "You walk like the world sits on your shoulders. But you smile like you're still choosing hope." She didn't know what to say to that. So she didn't say anything. Just looked at him, heart thudding. Because in that moment, for the first time in years, someone saw the full weight she carried. And didn't flinch. When she returned to her suite that night, the wine still warm in her belly, Elena didn't cry. She didn't lie awake questioning reality. She just lay there staring at the ornate ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Not love. Not yet. But trust. And in her world, that was even rarer. The next morning, Elena stood barefoot on the hotel balcony, watching the city stir beneath a watercolor sky. Paris looked different today. It wasn't just the light. It was her. Something inside her had shifted, subtle but undeniable, like her skin had remembered how to breathe. She still didn't belong in this world? Not really. But for the first time, that fact didn't come with shame. Just curiosity. A knock on her door pulled her from thought. She opened it to find a breakfast tray, Barry's fresh bread eggs, cooked just the way she liked, and next to it another note. No meetings today. Thought we could see the city. No pressure. D. She stared at the handwriting for a long moment. This was not a man filling time. This was a man making room. And room, Elena realized, was something no one had offered her in a very long time. She got dressed slowly. No makeup, no borrowed dress today. Just jeans, a clean blouse, and the kind of quiet confidence that came not from what she wore, but from how she'd been seen. Not as a project, not as a misstep, but as a woman worthy of the space she occupied. Damien was waiting downstairs in the garden courtyard, 2 coffees in hand. He smiled when he saw her, not like someone dazzled, but like someone relieved. "Still here," he said. "Still me," she answered. They started walking, neither of them in a rush. The air was cool, the sky high and wide. For a while they didn't speak. Then Elena said, "Can I ask you something?" Damien glanced over. "Anything." "What do you see when you look at me?" He stopped walking. Looked at her, really looked. "I see a woman who forgot how extraordinary she is, because life never gave her time to notice." Elena swallowed hard. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked. He tilted his head. A man trying very hard not to look lonely. He didn't deny it, didn't joke, just let it hang there in the air between them. Two people, two truths, no shame, no pity, just recognition. And that was how the second day began. Not with magic, not with declarations, but with something deeper. Two people who'd lived too long on opposite sides of survival, walking side by side, no longer pretending they weren't tired. They started the day with a map neither of them used. No itinerary, no reservations, just sneaker scarves and a vague sense that whatever they were looking for in Paris wasn't in a guidebook. They turned corners like children, stopped for pastries with too much powdered sugar, paused to listen to a jazz trio beneath a stone bridge, took wrong turns that led to quiet courtyards filled with plants and crooked bicycles. And somewhere between Rue Claire and a hidden alley of bookstalls, Elena stopped thinking about the end of this trip. She started thinking about what it meant to feel light. They stumbled into a small art gallery tucked between a cheese shop and an old tobacconist. No tourists, just warm wood floors and a woman behind the desk who greeted them in gentle French. Elena drifted to a painting near the back, an oil canvas of a girl sitting by a window, eyes closed, sunlight spilling across her shoulders. There was something familiar in the girl's face. Not the features, but the expression. Quiet, bruised, still trying. Damien came up beside her. "She looks like she's waiting for something," he said. Elena nodded. "Or someone." He looked at her but said nothing. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Later they ducked into a narrow bookstore with uneven floors and shelves stacked like puzzle pieces. Elena's fingers ran along the spines, French poetry, classic literature. A few titles she remembered from her father's collection. She pulled down an old copy of Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. The pages smelled like thyme. Damien stepped behind her. "You've read it?" he asked. "My dad made me," she said, "when I was too young to understand it. Then again when I was 22 and finally did." He smiled. "He sounds like a good man." He was. There it was. Not just memory, not just pain, but pride. Elena ran a hand across the cover and added softly, "My mom too. She made magic out of almost nothing. I don't think I realized it growing up." She tucked the book under her arm. "But now I see it everywhere. In how I make beds, in how I stretch a grocery budget, in how I stay standing when everything says I should fall." Damien didn't offer condolences. He just nodded like someone who knew that survival was its own kind of language. They sat outside the bookstore on a crooked bench, the Seine shimmering nearby. Damien leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I keep thinking about that painting," he said. "The girl at the window." He nodded. "It reminded me of Mark, my friend." Elena waited. "He used to say, 'Don't wait for life to tap you on the shoulder. You'll miss it. Just get in the room.'" He laughed. "It didn't make sense to me back then. I thought being in the room meant winning. And now, he looked over at her. Now I think it means showing up, even when you feel like you don't belong. Elena looked down at her hands. I almost didn't come downstairs that first night. Damien tilted his head. Why not? I felt out of place, like I'd accidentally walked into a life that wasn't mine. And now, she shrugged. I still feel that way, but not because of the money, or Paris, or your life. Then what? She hesitated, then said softly, because you keep looking at me like I belong. And I'm still learning how to believe that. Damien didn't smile this time. He didn't move closer. He just whispered, then I'll keep looking until you do. They walked in silence after that, through streets that didn't need narration. The sun dipped lower, casting amber light across the cobblestones. At a corner cafe, Damien bought 2 small glasses of citron pressé, and they sat watching people pass, tourists, lovers, locals with their baguettes and boredom. Elena breathed in the scent of citrus pavement, warm air. This isn't what I thought healing would look like, she said. What did you think it would look like? She smiled. Therapy, yoga, crying on the floor. He chuckled. Maybe it's just this. She turned to him. What's this? A day where your heart doesn't armor up before breakfast. Elena let that sit, and then nodded. But as the sky dimmed and the first chill crept in, she felt something tighten in her chest. Reality. Time. The return ticket she hadn't booked yet. Tomorrow was supposed to be goodbye. Back to work. Back to bills. Back to proving herself every single hour of every single day. She exhaled slowly. Hey, Damien said gently. What is it? She looked at him, then looked away. I should go back tomorrow. There. She said it, even though everything in her rebelled against it. Damien didn't argue, didn't push. He just watched her face carefully. And then, barely above a whisper, he said, just 2 more days. Stay. Please. Elena didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The words, just 2 more days. Stay. Please. Echoed louder than they should have. Because it wasn't the invitation that shook her. It was the please. That one word cracked something open. No one had asked her to stay in a long time. Not without strings. Not without obligation. Not without her having to earn it first. They sat there, the air cooling between them. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger, pretending to think. But she already knew the truth. She wanted to stay. God, she wanted to. Not just for Paris. Not even for Damien. But for the way she felt when she wasn't rushing, fixing, solving. When she was allowed to exist without performance. And that terrified her. I don't know who I am here, she said finally. Damien didn't rush her. You're exactly who you've always been, he said, just not tired. Elena looked at him, then away. You make it sound easy. It's not, he replied. But it's worth it. They walked back to the hotel slowly, past flower stalls shutting down for the evening, past old men playing cards in cafes, past lives she'd never live but could admire from the sidewalk. Back in her suite, she undressed without turning on the light. The Eiffel Tower blinked in the distance. She stood by the window in silence, wearing only her thoughts. She remembered something her mother once told her. Some doors open twice in life. The second time, they ask your name. She didn't know if this was that second time, but she knew she wasn't ready to walk away from it just yet. The next morning she knocked on Damien's door. Not timidly, not apologetically. He opened it, surprised but not shocked. She held up 2 fingers. 2 days. His smile came slowly, as if it were building from somewhere deeper than his mouth. I'll clear my calendar. Those 2 days became quiet magic. They rode bikes through the park. They visited a jazz club where no one spoke English, but everyone understood rhythm. They took a cooking class from an old woman who yelled at Damien for cutting garlic wrong. And in between all that, they talked, not in the way people flirt or impress, but in the way people reveal. Elena told him about her father's funeral, how she couldn't cry until 3 months later in the laundry aisle of a grocery store. Damien told her about the first time someone called him a fraud after Mark's death, and how for a moment he believed them. They didn't trade stories. They built something with them. Like laying bricks neither of them realized they were holding. On their second night, they sat on the rooftop again. Same table, same sky, but something had changed. They weren't strangers anymore. They weren't travelers anymore. They were something else, undefined, unlabeled, but real. I have to go back the day after tomorrow, Elena said. I know, Damien replied. She nodded slowly. But I don't want to forget this. You won't. You don't know that. He paused, then leaned forward just enough that the distance between them vanished without touch. Elena, he said gently, you're not the one who stumbled into my life. I'm the one who's been waiting. Her breath caught, not because of the words, but because of how they landed soft, reverent, true. It would have been easier if he were charming, easier if he were temporary, but he wasn't. He was present, and that made goodbye infinitely harder. That night as she drifted to sleep, Elena thought about all the time she'd left before anyone had a chance to ask her to stay. All the places where she'd been strong but never seen. All the rooms where she'd worked but never belonged. This time she had been seen first. And strength hadn't been a requirement. Only presence. Only truth. Only her. Elena woke before dawn. The city outside was still hushed, like Paris itself was holding its breath. She sat on the edge of the bedrobe, cinched at the waist, hair undone. No makeup, no mask. Just a woman with too many thoughts and too little time. Today was the last full day, unless she changed it. Unless she didn't. She stood at the window and watched the Eiffel Tower blink one last time before the sunrise swallowed it. Then she whispered, "Who are you, Elena?" It wasn't the first time she'd asked that, but it was the first time the answer didn't scare her. She wasn't the girl who cleaned up everyone else's messes. Wasn't just the nurse, the sister, the responsible one. Here on this street, in this borrowed robe, she was simply a woman. Whole, flawed, wanting, worthy. And that truth, it held more power than any fairy tale. She didn't see Damien until late morning. They met outside the hotel, both with takeaway coffee in hand, both quieter than usual. No declarations, no pressure. Just the quiet ache of time running out. He walked her through a quiet sculpture garden near the edge of the Seine. Children ran past them chasing pigeons and shouting in French. A man played cello under a linden tree. Elena looked at the stone bench ahead and paused. "I want to go home tomorrow," she said. Damien didn't flinch. "I know." She looked at him. "But I also want to remember what it felt like to be chosen, before I even had to explain myself." He nodded slowly. "You'll carry that home," he said. "I hope you let it change you." They sat for a while on the bench, watching shadows shift, watching each other in sidelong glances. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "I used to think healing meant going back to who I was before the pain." She paused, letting the thought settle. "But now I think it means becoming someone new because of it." Damien looked over. "And who are you becoming?" She smiled. "We'll see." That night as she packed her suitcase, careful, slow, grateful, Elena folded the green dress and set it on top. Not because she'd wear it again tomorrow, but because it reminded her sometimes life hands you softness when you least expect it. And when it does, maybe it's okay to keep a piece. The flight home was uneventful. No first-class surprise this time. Just recycled air, a stale sandwich, and a roommate who snored the entire way from Charles de Gaulle to JFK. But Elena didn't mind. She wasn't looking for magic. She was carrying it. In the green dress now folded neatly in her carry-on. In the scent of Paris still clinging to her scarf. In the memory of a man who hadn't tried to save her, just seen her. New York greeted her with noise. Taxi horns, subway steam, people brushing past like she didn't exist. She'd missed this city, or at least thought she had. But now everything felt louder, harder, more rushed. Or maybe it was her that had changed. She clutched the handle of her suitcase tighter. Just 2 days ago she was sipping wine on a rooftop in silence. Now she was dodging a man yelling into his AirPods, and a woman carrying 3 dogs in a backpack. "Welcome home," she muttered to herself. Her apartment looked the same. Still too small. Still 2 floors above a laundromat that always smelled like fabric softener and fried food. Her brother Marcus was on the couch, textbooks open, but eyes on a basketball game. He jumped up when he saw her. Yo, you're back early. Technically, I'm back on time. She smiled, setting her bag down. Marcus hugged her tighter than usual. I was starting to worry. You always worry, she said, ruffling his hair. I mean, who goes to Paris by accident? She chuckled. Apparently me. They ate takeout that night, pad thai, and spring rolls just like they used to after their parents' funeral, when neither of them could cook anything but instant noodles. Marcus talked about his classes, his sore calves from physical therapy rotations, the professor who kept calling him Malcolm by mistake. Elena laughed at all the right places, but something inside her remained. Quiet, not broken, just listening. Like her heart had learned a new language in Paris, and now the old one no longer fit. Later, after Marcus went to bed, she sat by the window with a cup of tea. Same chair, same chipped mug, but her reflection in the glass looked older. Not tired, not sad, just fuller. Like she took up more space now, even in silence. She picked up her phone and opened her messages. One unread. Damien Carter landed safely. I keep looking over my shoulder, expecting to see you. Hope the city is being gentle. No pressure, but I'd love to talk soon. Just say when. She stared at it for a long time, then locked the screen without replying. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how to bring Paris into this life. The next morning she went back to work. ICU shifts didn't care about Paris. Machines beeped. Families cried. Doctors barked orders. One patient coded before lunch. Elena fell into rhythm. Her hands knew what to do. But her heart, it stumbled. Especially when a woman yelled at her for not answering the call button fast enough. Especially when a new nurse looked through her like she was furniture. Especially when she saw her name on the schedule, 5 shifts this week. No break. No room. That night, she stood in the hospital locker room and stared at herself in the mirror. Makeup gone. Eyes heavy. Shoulders tense. And suddenly she whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" Not to herself. To the her she met in Paris. To the version of Elena who didn't apologize for needing peace. Who didn't shrink when seen. She didn't know how to be that Elena here. But for the first time, she wanted to learn. Wednesday came with gray skies and the kind of cold that seeped through jackets and bones. Elna was on her second shift in 36 hours. The hospital lights were too bright, the voices too sharp, the air too thin. She moved through the ICU like she always had, competent, focused, and visible. But something inside her was fraying. Not breaking, just unraveling thread by thread. "Hey, Morris," a nurse called from the next station. "You want to trade the psych case?" He's agitated. Keeps asking to speak to God or his wife. Elena blinked. "I'll take it." Better than watching the young mother in bed 9 pretend she wasn't scared to die, or the man in 14A who had refused treatment because his son stopped calling. Pain came in too many forms here. At least this one was loud and messy. She preferred it that way, easier to manage. The psych patient ended up being kind, confused but kind. Wanted to know the date. Asked if dogs could go to heaven. Thanked her when she changed his sheets. Before leaving the room, he grabbed her wrist gently. "You look like someone who saw something holy," he whispered. She paused, then smiled. "I did." Her break was short. A granola bar, half a bottle of water, 15 minutes with her back pressed against the wall in the stairwell just to feel alone without being afraid. She checked her phone. 3 messages. One from Marcus. "Do we still have laundry quarters, or did you use them for avocado toast?" One from HR, reminder mandatory CPR recert next Monday. And one from an unknown number. U.S. Customs, parcel notification. You have an international delivery requiring signature. Origin, France. Arrival today. She blinked. France. She hadn't ordered anything. She opened the link. There it was, tracking info. Sender name, D. Carter. That night when her shift ended and the city had gone soft with mist, she returned home to find the box waiting at the front desk. Small, wrapped in matte black paper, a white envelope on top with her name handwritten. She stared at it in the elevator, not ready to open it. Not yet. Inside her apartment, she changed out of scrubs and sat on the couch with the box between her palms. For a while, she just held it. Then carefully she opened the envelope. Elena, you don't owe me a reply. This isn't a question. It's just a reminder. That soft doesn't mean weak. That leaving doesn't mean forgetting. And that what you gave me wasn't a weekend. It was a doorway. I hope you walk through it someday. No pressure. D. Her throat tightened. She opened the box. Inside, folded delicately, was the scarf she'd worn on their bike ride, the one she'd left behind by accident. Tucked beneath it, a small hard-covered journal, leather-bound, deep brown. On the first page in Damien's handwriting, write it down, the parts you usually leave out. She ran her fingers over the page. The weight of it, the truth of it. She hadn't cried in Paris, but now here in this cramped apartment with the heat hissing and her feet sore, Elena wept. Not from sadness, but because someone remembered the version of her she was still trying to believe existed. Later that night, long after the city went quiet, she sat by the window and opened the journal. She wrote, I didn't expect softness to follow me home, but it did. And maybe healing isn't leaving the hard parts behind. Maybe it's letting them be seen and staying anyway. She closed the book, pressed it to her chest, and for the first time in years, she whispered aloud, I want more than survival. Saturday morning came quietly. Elena stood in the kitchen with her hair tied up, stirring instant oatmeal. The journal lay open beside her, half a page filled with thoughts from the night before. Marcus shuffled in yawning phone in hand. Hey, he mumbled, grabbing a mug. You get something from France. She nodded, trying to sound casual. Just a scarf and a book. Must have been one hell of a trip, he said, sipping his coffee. She smiled faintly. You have no idea. Her phone buzzed. A new email. She tapped it open without thinking, then stopped. Subject acceptance. La Maison Blanche. Nursing fellowship. She blinked, scrolled down. Dear Ms. Elena Morris, we are pleased to inform you that your application for our Visiting Trauma Nurse Fellowship in Paris has been approved. Your references and prior experience are exceptional. The program will begin in 6 weeks. Housing provided. Duration 3 months, full scholarship. Please confirm your participation by next Friday. Elena just stared. She hadn't thought they'd actually say yes. She'd applied after her shift, the night she returned on a whim, half-hearted, like tossing a letter into the wind. And now the wind had answered. She sat down slowly, heart pounding. Fellowship. 3 months. In Paris. Not vacation, not escape. Work, learning, growth, and a chance to do what she did best, but in a place where she had felt most seen. Marcus looked up from his toast. You okay? Elena met his eyes. I just got invited back to Paris. He blinked. Wait, what? Fellowship. Trauma unit. 3 months. Fully funded. He paused. Then grinned. I mean, I'll miss your terrible grocery budgeting, but you gotta go. She laughed a little breathless. I don't even know what to pack. Pack who you were in Paris, he said, grabbing another slice of toast. Leave the rest here. Later alone, Elena stood in front of the mirror. She didn't look different, but everything inside her was shifting. Not because of Paris, not because of Damien, but because for once life had extended a hand, and she was reaching back. Not with fear, with choice, with voice, with her. The city looked the same. Golden streets, narrow alleys, balconies dripping with flowers. Couples leaning into each other as if the world outside their conversation didn't matter. But Elena, she wasn't the same woman who had stumbled into this place weeks ago, weary and invisible. Now she stood at the edge of Terminal 2E, passport in hand, wearing a navy blazer she'd bought secondhand, and a calm she hadn't known she could carry. Not tourist, not runaway, just a woman returning to the city that first reminded her she was more than what life had demanded of her. The hospital wasn't the romantic kind. La Maison Blanche sat tucked between 2 aging stone buildings. On the left bank, a trauma care annex with peeling paint and nurses who moved with purpose. And Elena loved it instantly. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. It was real. Like her. Her first shift was a blur. French came back in bits and pieces. Pain and pressure, however, spoke every language. She inserted IVs, took vitals, soothed the child burned by boiling water, argued with a doctor over the right wound dressing. By the end of the day, her scrubs were wrinkled, her feet ached, and her soul buzzed with purpose. It felt nothing like the hotel rooftop, but somehow it felt closer to home. Back in her new apartment, a tiny studio above a florist shop, Elena collapsed into bed. The room smelled like jasmine and street noise. A fan whirred gently in the corner. She stared at the ceiling, heart full. She hadn't thought about Damien all day. That was new. She hadn't tried not to. She just hadn't needed him to hold up the idea of herself anymore. That didn't mean she'd forgotten, just that now she could remember him without asking for permission to be strong. On her third night back, she stopped by a local bookstore after her shift. The same one they'd wandered through together. The same crooked floor, same old Baldwin copy still sitting on the shelf. This time she didn't reach for it. She found a new one instead, French poetry, simple and sad. At the register, the owner looked up from her notebook. "You've been here before," she said, in thickly accented English. "I have." Elena smiled. "You look different then." "How so?" The woman tilted her head thoughtfully. "You looked like you were holding your breath." Elena nodded. "I was." Friday afternoon came with a surprise. An invitation. Envelope. Cream-colored. Embossed. Tucked in her hospital mailbox between staff memos and a cafeteria menu. She opened it slowly. "Ms. Elena Morris, it would be my honor to host you at the Maison Carter private dinner series this Sunday evening as part of our Women in Health and Innovation recognition event. With respect, Damien Carter." Her hands trembled just slightly. Not with fear, with memory, and maybe with something she hadn't let herself admit yet, hope. She didn't RSVP right away, didn't text, didn't call. She just held the card to her chest that night, standing by the tiny window above the florist shop, watching Paris flicker like a breathing thing. What did she want? Closure, another beginning, or simply to say, "I came back, not for you, but I'm still here." Sunday arrived in a blur of nerves and flat-ironed hair. She wore the same green dress, not to repeat a moment, but to reclaim it. The car sent for her was quiet, the driver polite, the city glowing. Maison Carter was unlike anything she remembered. Not the same hotel rooftop, not a private suite, but a newly restored building in the 8th arrondissement, a center for community investment and health innovation. She stepped through the doors, shoulders square, chin high. She didn't scan the room for him. She didn't need to, because when Damien saw her first, he didn't move. He just looked, like he was still seeing her for the first time. The crowd inside Maison Carter buzzed with the kind of polished energy Elena usually avoided: investors in sharp suits, doctors with rehearsed speeches, women with quiet power in their eyes. She moved through them gracefully, even as her pulse tapped out a nervous rhythm under her skin. Damien stood by the far window in a tailored black suit that didn't try too hard. He was speaking with a woman in a navy pantsuit and a man she recognized from a TED Talk. But the second he saw her, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, not possession. Something quieter, something like respect. She didn't walk straight to him. Instead, she wandered toward the refreshment table, picked up a sparkling water, and exhaled slowly. Let him come to her if he wanted to. Let everything about tonight begin on her terms. He approached minutes later. No fanfare, no dramatic tension. Just the man she'd once watched peel an orange on a balcony in silence. Elena. Damien. They stood there for a moment. Two people, no longer strangers, but no longer sure what they were either. "You look," he began, then stopped himself. "Different." She raised an eyebrow. "Good different, or different, like I cut my own bangs." He smiled, stronger. She tilted her head. "I am." A pause. "Thank you for the invitation," she added. "Thank you for showing up." "I almost didn't. I would have understood." She nodded. "But I needed to see this. To see you. Here." "And what do you see?" She didn't answer right away. Then, a man who stopped waiting. Damien's lips parted slightly, caught off guard. "Is that a good thing?" "I'm not sure yet," she said. "But it means you're not just hoping anymore. You're building." He offered her a glass of wine. She declined. They stepped aside to a quiet corner of the room, near a series of photographs of women leading medical projects in underserved areas. One of the portraits, an older black woman in scrubs, caught Elena's eye. "She reminds me of my mother," she said. "She reminds me of the woman who told me Paris wasn't mine to give her." Elena laughed softly. "She was right." Damien nodded. "She was." They stood in silence, surrounded by the murmurs of success and ambition. Then softly he said, "I didn't invite you here to win you back." Elena turned toward him, eyebrows raised. "I believe you. I invited you because this place, this mission, it happened after you. Because of you. You reminded me what matters." She looked at him steady. "And what is that?" "Showing up," he said. "Even when we're scared. Even when we think we don't belong." She breathed in slowly. That same old weight, the one she used to carry around her spine, didn't return. Instead, something warm filled her chest. "Not romance. Not yet. Just truth." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "What?" "That I left." "No. Why not?" He hesitated. "Because you came back different," he said. "Not for me, but for you." She stared at him for a moment longer, then gave him something she hadn't offered before, a smile with no armor behind it. The rest of the night passed gently. They didn't dance. They didn't sneak away for whispered declarations. They simply lingered near each other, close enough to remember, distant enough to respect the space between who they were and who they might still become. When it was time to leave, Damien walked her to the car. He opened the door, waited. No pressure, just presence. She stepped inside, then leaned out the window. "I'm still writing," she said. "In the journal." She nodded. "Some days it's only one line, but it's mine." He smiled. "I hope someday you'll let me read it." "Maybe," she said, "when I stop writing just to survive." And with that, the door closed. The car pulled away. And for the first time since Paris, Elena didn't look back to see if he was still standing there. Because whether he was or not, she was already moving forward. The ride back to her apartment was quiet. No city noise could break the stillness in her chest. The driver said something in French about the weather. Elena nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere, still wrapped around the way Damien had looked at her. Not like a man waiting, not like a man chasing, just like someone witnessing. And somehow that was more powerful than any declaration. She climbed the stairs slowly, heels clicking against the old tile. Once inside, she peeled off the green dress carefully, like it was a story she was folding back into the shelf. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in silence, then reached for the journal. "Tonight I didn't fall in love again, but I remembered that I could, and that feels like enough." She paused, then added, "Softness is still here, even when the room is full of people, even when I'm not being held, especially then." The next morning she woke to the sound of flower buckets being filled downstairs. Sunlight crept through the shutters, casting gold across the floor. She made coffee, slowly savoring the quiet. She had a shift in 3 hours. Patients would bleed. Alarms would ring. The world would demand things of her again. But for now she breathed. In, out, whole, unrushed. She reached for her phone. No new messages. She didn't mind. She opened her email and began typing. "To La Maison Blanche, Director Subject Extension Request." Just 3 more months. Not because she was running, but because for once she was choosing to stay. Elena didn't expect to see him again so soon. But life, like Paris, had a way of circling back to unfinished conversations. She was coming off a 12-hour shift, exhausted hair pulled into a crooked bun jacket slung over her shoulder, when she saw him standing across the street from La Maison Blanche. Leaning casually against a parked car, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on her like he'd never stopped watching. No fanfare, no text ahead of time, just presence. Again, she walked toward him slowly, not smiling yet, not wary either, just curious. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I had a meeting nearby," he said. "Thought I'd take the long way back." She raised an eyebrow. "You came to the 14th arrondissement just to take the long way?" He shrugged, grinning. "Paris traffic, full of detours." She exhaled through a laugh. "You're still terrible at pretending." He nodded. "I know." They stood there a moment, Elena in her tired scrubs and worn sneakers, Damien in that coat, that probably cost more than her month's rent, and it should have felt uneven. But it didn't. Not anymore. He looked at her the way men look when they know they have no control and they're okay with that. Like he was just glad she existed in his radius. I heard you extended the fellowship, he said. Word travels fast. You think I wouldn't check in on the organization that bears my name? She smirked. Don't tell me you came to flex your influence. He grew serious. No, I came because I wanted to see you. She folded her arms partly for warmth, partly to ground herself. And now that you have, he hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Before you say no, he said, just read it. She took it slowly, unfolding it. It wasn't a letter. It was a blueprint, a sketched floor plan, hand-drawn ink still smudged in places. There were 2 levels of garden and a notation in the corner, Maison de Récit, the story house. She looked up. It's a project, Damien said quietly. A center for community healing, stories, art, writing, recovery, led by women, for women, especially those who've lost too much too quietly. She blinked. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to build it, and because I don't want to be the one who leads it. I want someone who understands the quiet parts, the survival parts. He looked at her, then steady. I want you. Elena said nothing for a long moment. The wind picked up, brushing hair across her cheek. She didn't brush it away. She just stared at the blueprint, then at him. Then said, I didn't come back here for you. I know. I didn't stay for you either. I know that too. She looked down at the sketch again. The name in the corner. Maison de Récit. House of Stories. She smiled softly. You're not asking me to stay. No, he said. I'm asking if I can walk beside you. If you decide to move forward. She folded the paper, tucked it into her bag, then leaned in just enough to press her forehead gently against his. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just an acknowledgement that sometimes we choose love not because we need it, but because we're finally free not to. The next day, Elena walked to work early. Not because she had to, but because her body wanted motion while her mind sifted through the night before. Damien's sketch weighed nothing in her bag, but it filled every step. At the hospital, she moved through the halls with new eyes. She saw the young nurse flinch when the head doctor snapped at her, saw the patient in room 12 get ignored when she asked for help walking, saw the woman in recovery, black skin against white sheets, watch every staff member pass without ever making eye contact. Invisible. Again. After her shift, she sat in the break room, fingers curled around a paper cup of lukewarm tea. She pulled out the sketch, ran her thumb across the corner where it said Maison de Récit. The idea had her heart racing and her fear flaring all at once. Lead something. She'd spent most of her life patching other people's holes, not building anything of her own. She was the support beam, not the architect. But then she heard a voice in her mind, not Damien's, her mother's. You've always been the house baby girl. You just thought you were the furniture. She smiled even as tears welled, then pulled out her phone, not to text Damien, but to call Marcus. He answered on the second ring. Yo, I need you to talk me down, she said without preamble. What's up? I was offered something. Big, terrifying, important. Say yes, he said. You don't even know what it is. I don't need to, he replied. If it scares you, it probably means you're supposed to do it. She paused. You're really annoying when you're right. He laughed. That's why you love me. That evening she didn't write in the journal. She read it. Every entry. From the first page, I didn't expect softness to follow me home, to the latest. I want to build something that doesn't disappear when I do. And then beneath the final line, she wrote, Yes, let's build. The next day she met Damien at a quiet cafe in the Marais. No fanfare, no speeches. Just 2 people seated across from each other, hands wrapped around warm mugs, eyes steady. He didn't ask for an answer. She gave it anyway. I'm in. Damien didn't smile right away. Instead, he exhaled long and slow, like someone who'd just been trusted with something sacred. Okay, he said simply, then paused. What made you decide? She stirred her coffee, then looked up. I remembered who I was before I had to survive. She reached into her bag, pulled out the folded blueprint, slid it back to him. But this time, I'm not giving that version of me away just to prove I'm capable. I'm building for her. He nodded. I wouldn't want it any other way. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. They just finished their coffee, paid the bill, and walked out into the golden Paris afternoon side by side. Not ahead, not behind. Together. That night, Elna stood at her apartment window again. Same street, same flower buckets below. But everything was different, because for once the story wasn't about where she'd been. It was about what she would build next. Weeks passed. Paris remained the same cobbled streets, impatient drivers, pastries too pretty to eat. But Elena had changed, and this time she didn't try to shrink herself back to fit. The Maison de Récit project moved from paper to blueprint to promise. She visited the site once a week, an old printing house near the canal, soon to become a space where women could write, speak, create, recover. Not just survive. Live. She met with builders, interviewed social workers, sat in a dusty corner with a woman who'd lost 2 children and said, I haven't spoken in 3 weeks, but I want to write. Elna just nodded. You don't have to sound strong, she whispered. You just have to sound like you. One morning she stood in the empty space that would become the writing room. Dust floated in sunbeams like ash and hope. She pressed her palm to the exposed brick. I was always worthy, she said quietly, then smiled. I just forgot for a while. She didn't see Damien every day. He had his world, she had hers. But some nights he'd show up with takeout and wine and 2 journals, one blank, one half written, and they'd sit quietly writing side by side. Not lovers trying to impress, just 2 people grateful to be still seen and safe. One night he asked her, Do you ever think about the flight? She looked at him over her wine glass. Every time I buckle my seatbelt. He chuckled. It changed everything. She nodded. No, I changed everything. He grinned. I stand corrected. You usually do? She teased. That evening before sleep she added one last entry to her journal. I didn't board the wrong plane. I boarded the right one at the exact wrong time in my life, because that's when I needed to remember who I was becoming. Not someone's second chance, not someone's angel, just Elena. Whole, healing. Here. She closed the book, not the chapter, just that page, and turned off the light.